Right, so we are live, and this is the second meeting of the RobotPerf project. Hi, everyone, and Jason, back to you.
Awesome, cool. So one thing we were thinking would be important on our side would be to speak about the nomenclature and iron that out. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. There we go. All right. So for those of you who haven't been keeping up, or I don't know, here's the link to this GitHub pull request. And so we went through and we tried to define some of the terms that we're going to be using in this benchmark frequently, just so that when we use these words, we all mean the same things. So I'm going to quickly read through some of these definitions, and then I also have, I put it into a visualization to make it easier to understand, so that way we can better communicate about it. So the first thing we defined was an application, which is like a particular use case in the real world. And so an application could be like an autonomous car, or like an industrial robotic arm, or a quadruped, something of that sort, something you'd see in the real world. And then a benchmark is a standardized test or a set of tests, and it will usually consist of it'll measure some sort of metrics that we have in our standards, and then multiple of these benchmarks would be a benchmarking suite, right? And then we've been talking about this data set versus ROS-bag. So data sets are going to be I can't say that word. Sorry. So synonymous. ROS-bags and data sets. So yeah, basically we want a method of recording the ROS message data and playing that back. So then when we run our benchmark, we have same data to evaluate different hardware on. So these data sets would most likely come from a specific application. So you can imagine if there's a car driving down the road and we are collecting all this sensor information, whether it's LiDAR, and then the position of it, cameras, things of that sort. So all that would be collected in a data set. And then depending on what type of benchmark you're using, you choose some of the messages inside of that data set. And so that brings us to meta package and package. Basically, a meta package is multiple related packages. So that could be the nav2 meta package, or things of that sort. And then, of course, we can dial it down to a specific package, which is just a basic unit of code that has ROS nodes, libraries, a launch file, configuration files, all the necessary nitty-gritty stuff to make it a ROS2 package. So then within our benchmarking suite, we could be evaluating a specific meta package, right? And then each one of our benchmarks would evaluate a specific package within that meta package. So it could be a specific function, a stereo image, or something of that sort. And then, of course, we're going to evaluate that based on our standards, which have been proposed in the RAP 2014. And then finally, that brings us to reference implementation, which is just a standardized implementation of a benchmark that we can use as a baseline for comparisons with other implementations. So if you evaluate this data set on a specific piece of hardware, so that will be your baseline. And then once you add different types of hardware, you can then compare it to something. So that would be what a reference implementation is. Okay.
Should pose the question.
Oh yeah. By the way, yeah. If you want it, let me pause. Is there anything so far that is very out of line or something that the group thinks should be defined in a different way?
Or is there anything missing?
Or missing?
So maybe I can just comment a couple of things. So well, maybe taking a step back, I love that you took the lead on that, Jason. So let's see if we all agree. Let's just dive into trying to converge into this first, because I think it has priority and the contribution is great. And then I'd love to maybe save some time to also do the same with Rep 2014, which has received some contributions from some of you. So maybe all of us can also take a deep dive into that, or not a deep, but at least a dive into that. And also somehow get things going as we progress. Now, regarding the contributions, I just must admit I love it. So thank you, Jason, and also everyone else involved. I frankly speaking think something like this was very needed. Matthew, also thank you for the follow-up. I love them. The only concerns that I have is regarding some of the definitions that originally were included concerning task and task hierarchy and subtask. What is your take on that? And can we? I mean, I do understand that there is some heritage in here you're trying to incorporate, but frankly speaking, my only comment would be let's not force things just for the sake of keeping heritage for ML-Perf, because frankly speaking, we're speaking about a totally different domain in here. And there's some nomenclature already present in the field. And if we just introduce new ones or rename things, then it's going to make things very hard for people to grasp. So maybe it's worth asking, can you elaborate on task hierarchy, subtask, and why do we need this?
Yeah, Victor, you're completely right. So our initial idea was to structure, keep the terminology very similar to what's been done in ML-Perf. But the more we talked about it in our group, I think we're converging to, what you're talking about. Because in robotics, yes, we are talking about a completely different domain. And so if we start defining things in a really absurd way, it might just add unnecessary complications. So having said that, our robotics, and there are a few other things we want to discuss. So let's start with the robotics pipeline. And so actually let's start with task. So we were initially imagining that a task would be a part of the robotics pipeline, like perception, localization, control, whatever. But as you said, I think in the community of robotics, those different parts of the pipeline should be referred to as categories. Is that a better way of referring to them, in your opinion?
So when I read task, what comes to my mind is node. No, I don't know if everyone else would agree, but it does sound like specific computation to me.
Okay, that's not what we. Okay, I see how you could understand it that way. That's not what we were trying to go for. What we were trying to go for is what is each part of the robotics pipeline. Perception would be a task, but I think it's better defined as a category. So so we'd have multiple categories, and then we can have subcategories. And I kind of drew this out so we can better think of it. And I already changed here the terminology from tasks to categories because I definitely agree with you, Victor.
Maybe before we move forward on this, there's one. I mean, this is just based on my humble experience, but there's various ways to categorize things in the robotics pipeline, and there's no unified agreement on how to actually define the robotics pipeline. Certainly, perception, manipulation, navigation, localization, control are often the case included as part of the robotics pipeline. Actually, I have a picture in here which shows you. Can I real quick share this?
Yeah, of course. Give me a second. Let me,
So this comes from a patent application. Actually, we filed a while ago, and it does get inspired actually by other publications. But I can tell you, you can come up with counter examples. This is yet another representation of the robotics pipeline, and it has a number of the tasks that you often the case see within frameworks like ROS, and there's various ways to depict and represent this. So my gut feeling, and again, I don't want to drive the conversation too much in this direction. I think we need terminology. The value proposition that you've made is fantastic. I think it's ready to be accepted if everyone agrees. I would only ask us to maybe hold a bit on the latest items regarding task hierarchy, subtask, and workload, and maybe we can push this into a different pull request and maybe have a deeper conversation on this, because
Okay.
right now it feels it's a bit confusing how we're mixing kind of like the robotics pipeline with the benchmarks that we plan to kind of like do, because for each one of the categories we can have multiple benchmarks.
agreed.
And I guess then this would match with a task. So so then we have there an overlap between the definition of a task, definition of a benchmark. So so yeah, that's a concern that I would like to raise. Again, from my perspective, this is good to go. I would only ask maybe for task hierarchy, subtask, and workload to maybe be pushed into a different pull request, and then we can discuss that deeper. And then maybe workload is something also I had a bit of hard time understanding better. Can you guys maybe comment on that real quick?
Yeah, so like within a specific task and a subtask, we were thinking a workload would be like a how should I say this? Let's say we're taking like a package of the stereotype image, the stereo image package. Then a workload would be that package on a certain set of data. But I think we should, as I was reading over it, I think workload is also adding like some confusion also in my mind. So like I'll separate this pull request. I think the first half kind of makes sense, and then I'll separate the second half, and we can take another pass through it and try to make it less confusing.
Yeah. The way I was thinking about it when I wrote it was task would be like a part of the pipeline, so like perception, and then perception has a bunch of other tasks associated with it, like
Resize or rectify.
yeah.
So those are subtasks.
Yeah, sure. And then within that, you could imagine having like different types of object detection. For example, for a drone, or you might have different benchmarks for like an autonomous car that's doing object detection, and you would want a separate benchmark for each of those, and that would be a workflow. That was the idea.
Okay, I don't quite grasp that last bit you mentioned regarding various applications, because if at the end of the day, again, if we map, so that's what I was kind of like, that was my gap. Like maybe as part of this additional pull request, we can make a table and map each one of these words with an example, like task, perception, subtask, rectify and resize, and then workload. And I guess I'm missing that piece.
So what Jason's saying, like if you had like 10 different data sets that you wanted to do object detection on, that were like 4 different things, because you can have different forms of of object detection, right? Then you would have a different benchmark for each of these, but it's still within that one subclass.
So it's an instantiation of a benchmark with different
Data.
data. Okay,
Yeah.
that's what a workload
It's
is.
for a different application, or it could be just, a different type of benchmark for the same application, something like that.
So what makes a workload is essentially mixing subtasks with various data sets.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay, a bit confusing, I think, but yeah, I think we can follow what we agreed on. If that's okay with you, Matthew and Jason, we can
Yeah.
split it
Yeah.
and move forward. And
Okay.
accounting
Yeah.
for this is great, guys. Thank you so much. And
Is there a way you can share the resource for that robotics pipeline figure that you showed?
Yeah, I can follow up offline and we can share that up. Yeah.
Awesome. Thanks,
Yep.
Matthew.
Yeah, just ping me and I'll forward it.
Cool. Awesome.
I had a comment regarding the data set. So I think last time we mentioned we were using ROSBAG, but we moved to data set for a generalization as such. But if like in the definition right now, it's like used synonymously with ROSBAG. So if we are in the end, the input is going to be ROSBAG, then why not just use ROSBAG? But now if you're using data set, we can generalize it a bit, let's say because video. We can just mention the data set can be a video, but it needs to be converted to a ROS message format for it to be an input. So if you're just using it synonymously with ROSBAGs, then why not keep ROSBAG? But if you're using data sets, we can generalize it a bit more, where the image can be a set of images, but you need to have your own conversion to standard ROS message format to be an input to this framework.
Yeah, so I think that so you have a point, Pratik, indeed. Like if we are using it synonymously, why don't we just use ROSBAG? I guess my reaction to this is more that I think we want to consider more than just ROSBAGs down the road, and we want to generalize in a way.
Correct.
So we need to slightly modify the wording and not point out that we are using it synonymously with ROSBAGs, but just point out that ROSBAGs are one of the possible examples of data sets. And that way, and we can keep the rest of the content, which is totally fine. But I do agree, and also if you guys are paying attention to the ROSBAG madness, there's ROSBAG 2, and there's these new formats, and yeah, so people's changing it. It may change down the road even further as we have new robotic operating systems coming up. So I in general, I like the dataset wording. I think it also matches with lots of people operating in the benchmarking world. I think Jason, you and Matthew are more of let's say systems architect native folks, and I guess you can confirm this whether dataset or ROSBAG makes more sense.
Sure. I like how you phrase it, where ROSBAG would be a type of data set, and then that would make it easier to abstract later on if we want to pass in like some other sort of information to package.
Yeah,
like,
it's inclusive of ROSBAGs, but not synonymous.
Yeah. So change that definition up so we don't say it's synonymous.
Awesome. All right, so we move forward. Awesome. So we have 5 minutes left. I just wanted to touch on Rep 2014 contributions from Raisa. Does that make sense, folks?
Yeah, that's great.
Okay, so I'll just be sharing my screen in here, covering that up, and maybe we have a few minutes to touch on next steps afterwards. Okay, so Rep 2014, am I sharing? Yes, I believe so. Yeah, so as I was saying, lots of people commenting, lots of people having opinions, so sometimes it's a bit hard to progress documents like this. But I do appreciate the effort that Raisa put into making this suggestion. Raisa, would you like to comment on this, or should I go through it?
Well, this was like a test suggestion because one of my first suggestions in the comments was to put this tracing and benchmarking section where you define what you're talking about earlier in the document, because I think in terms of logic, it makes sense. Like even if someone doesn't know what we're talking about, so we define it early on.
Yep.
And so this change was just like basically moving that section upwards in the document, but I don't know if it's clear from within the suggestion. So that's why I only put this one. So if it's not like in the correct format, then I can do it in a different way.
No, I personally like it. I don't know if anyone else has an opinion. So technically speaking, and I would recommend this view for everyone aiming to also review the pull request, which allows you to do and check comments in a somehow organized manner, other than the discussion, which tends to be very messy. So I do like it. I think so. We are having essentially the abstract, which is short and concise. Then we have an introductory section, which dives on essentially what's the value for stakeholders. And then there's a section in here touching on tracing and benchmarking, because it's a pretty relevant topic. I believe this is a subsection, right?
Yeah, it is. I would like to switch it to a section, and maybe my next suggestion would be to add a rationale section where we how do I put this? We justify writing a rep on benchmarking, which is I think what Andrew suggested in one of the comments.
Yep. I would love to review that. Yeah, and so
Okay.
just to get everyone on the same page. So technically, the actual contribution is pushing the definitions that right now are in here. So these definitions are being pushed into here, right?
Yeah, that's it.
So I would go for it. Any concerns regarding this? None? All right. So it's just going to take a click. There we go. All right, so that's in already, and that's the one I wanted to review. There's a bunch of others that I need to go through again. Maybe some of these, actually this one also removes it, so I'm just going to commit this one as well. Thank you, Raisa. And with those two out of the way, I think that I didn't leave aside any of the others, right? The other ones that you sent previously were just suggestions in text, which need to be formatted as an actual.
Yeah, I will.
Awesome. Yeah. So so thanks a lot, and yeah, do feel free to start adding your name somewhere in the document. So maybe you can get that up with the next contribution as well. And yeah, encouraging everyone to also take a dive into this, especially I know the Harvard folks, Jason, Matthew, as you are diving into nomenclature, it'd be awesome to maybe map this document, and any sort of like edge you detect, feel free to contribute it and maybe polish it. That's a great way to round it and to make sure that we have both the standardization approach as well as the RobotPerf implementation somehow in the same place.
Well, about nomenclature, there was one of the comments about, I think it was Ken Chen. I don't really remember the name. They said something about not using the name black box performance testing. Yeah, that's the one.
Yep.
What do you guys think about that?
Yeah, so I did see this one. I didn't answer him because I didn't have time and I forgot. Thank you for bringing it up. Actually, I do have a different opinion than this person. Not sure if he's a she or a he, but yeah. I pointed this out in the yeah, here it is. So there's a document in here. Which was reviewed by community members in the past. It's titled Performance Testing in Wells 2. It was built by a group comprised by various companies involving some of them who got acquired in the past. And they do provide a really nice overview of performance testing, which can be applied directly to benchmarking. And they categorize things based on this nomenclature. And this comes also from literature. So this wording has been actually used in literature for quite a while. So I do get that depending on which field you come from, this may sound confusing, but it sounds like this is the trend in the testing world. So I don't see a big reason why we shouldn't keep this. However, if someone has a counter example, like that's the one that I would provide, and maybe for past references to black box tests. Maybe I can just point that out. But yeah, if someone has a counter example, I'd say just bring it up and let's discuss it. Awesome. All right, so I guess we just filled up the half an hour. Maybe so we touched on both of these things, which is what I wanted to. So that's fantastic. Any next contributions that we should note down? So I can get started from our side, from Acceleration Robotics, and from my side. We'll continue contributing to the ROS2 benchmark tooling, which I presented last time, if you guys remember with the tutorial. So you can expect some additional contributions. And then the next thing we're working on is on closing the loop on a CI pipeline that's going to push data automatically to the actual benchmarks. And right now we're targeting 2 reference platforms. Right now we're testing things out with AMD's technology and NVIDIA's technology, with 2 instances of each one. But just to be very clear, the moment we get the thing closed, the loop closed, then we can add many boards real quick, which we have. So it shouldn't be a bottleneck. Yeah, I can see Jason self-assigning the nomenclature aspects. Thank you, guys. And I guess there'll be maybe also some contributions from you, Raisa, regarding following up with reviewing Rep 2014.
Yeah, will do.
Awesome. Awesome. So anyone else? Okay, Michelle, Nafis, do feel free to let us know if you have some bandwidth and would like to get started with anything. My recommendation would be to maybe follow up with Jason and Matthew on the catch-up of the actual RobotPerf benchmarks repository, and maybe start thinking or considering if you can just produce a first 101 benchmark by following up with the tutorial that I gave last time concerning how to create your first benchmark. So yeah, this recording, I think we're going to point people to this a few times. So yeah, do feel free to review that. Nafis particularly, and yeah, looking forward, guys, to get your contributions. And yeah, hopefully very soon we can start speaking about this scaling up.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Victor.
Thanks, Victor. Thanks, everyone.
All right. Thanks, everyone. Thanks, Pratik.
Thank you.
It's really late for you folks. Thank you for joining.
Yes.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Yes.
Good night.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Thank you, everyone. Ciao.